Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Brian Ray, and I am the Operations Manager at CAAM. Welcome to the Out Here Shorts Program Q&A at CAAMFest 2021. We would like to acknowledge our wonderful co-presenters, which are organizations who serve and support diverse communities. For this program in particular, we would like to thank API ENC, Frameline, and Moments Co-op. Programs like CAAMFest 2021 and CAAM's other year-round programming are made possible by our community of supporters around the world. Help us bring compelling and diverse Asian American stories to light. Donate or join as a CAAM member at CAAM's secure website. That's CAAmedia.org. For a limited time, new members can save 15% on our friend and supporter memberships using the promo code CELEBRATESTORIES. All right, on to our Q&A. You have all just watched the Out Here Shorts program, a program that has celebrated over a decade at our festival. Out Here explores the intersectionality of AAPI and LGBTQ+ stories, and we are thrilled to have filmmakers here to speak about each of the short films. To begin, let's welcome the director of SummerWinterSummer, Tran. Welcome, T. Thanks for being here.
Hi, sorry, I didn't know what to say.
No worries. Thank you so much for being here. All right, I'll start with some questions. Here we go. Sure. All right, well, so this is such a tender story. Can you talk about what your message is with this film?
The message, well, I wanted to get across the fact that now it's just so hard to find a real connection in this age where we have abundance of technology to communicate, but the real connection is kind of lost in the fast pace of life, and everything is just so like next kind of thing. It's like, where do you find this kind of connection?
And then, so your actors were great in this film, and I was just curious if you could talk about working with them.
It was, you know, it was smooth sailing because I described the how I imagined the scene. I just kind of let them play it out, and when they're not hitting the right notes kind of thing, I just kind of give them the note like, oh, don't be so dramatic at this point. Just kind of hold it in and just kind of, you know, don't cry yet. Wait for the right moment kind of thing. But I mean, I just let them do carry out their craft. That's just really amazing.
That's great. Going back to that, I'm just kind of curious if the original script, how that process was, because it does sound like you incorporated a lot of their, what they brought to the part. So did the script change much from the original concept to the final product?
With the actor, initially I envisioned a European lover, because it's based on my personal experience. But when I found him, I just felt he was just the perfect fit. But because he didn't speak French, so I just kind of tweaked a little bit of his background story, where he's American, but just move all over the place kind of story. So it makes him a little bit more American.
And I mean, I noticed you said that it's based on a personal experience. Was there any hesitation or butterflies with kind of telling a personal story to such a wide audience?
Oh my God, yes. I mean, a lot of my friends, when I showed the film to them, they just know exactly what happened. And I mean, and there's also part fiction, part biographical. And I mean, I just let the audience guess what really happens and whatnot.
And then going back to kind of what you said about how difficult it is to make a connection right now, do you find this film like as a reflection of the gay community when it comes to dating? I know that obviously that applies to right now during a pandemic, but in general, do you think that that's kind of a reflection as the larger community?
Well, one of the main reasons why I made this film is that I grapple with the issue of racism within the gay community for a long time, ever since I came out as a gay man. I thought the hardest thing was just like, hi, mom and dad, I'm gay. Friends and family, I'm gay. And I thought that was going to be the end of it. But just being feeling accepted by the gay community was kind of challenging. I just couldn't like I just couldn't get over the fact that there's like it's just so normal to find people that says like no Asians on the dating profile, and no matter how hard I try to push that off, but it burns every time I see it. So, and before the pandemic and the whole violence against the Asian community right now, which is a topic that I feel that I needed to get across. But yeah.
I think that's really important to bring up. And, I think it's very unfortunate that, like you said, the act of coming out, you think there's going to be this moment of relief, and to find this community that's supposed to be accepting and inclusive and loving, to have that kind of a dark side where people play it off as a preference or whatever. It's really, it obviously needs to change, and hopefully stories like this can kind of open people's eyes a little bit more to the experiences. We are kind of running out on time for your film, but I'm curious where people can learn about your film and follow it after the festival.
Right now I have a website running, and it's swsfilm.com, and I'll try to update the film as we go along, and what kind of festivals we might get in, and what and the journey of it.
Perfect. Well, thank you so much, T. Really appreciate you being here, and really appreciate you making Summer Winter Summer. Thank you. All right. Well, we are now going to chat with the director of the film The Leaf, and that would be Will Zang. Hi, Will.
Hi, Brian. Hello, everyone. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thank you for being here. Congratulations on finishing your film. Can you talk about why you wanted to tell your story?
Well, basically, making this film since I lost, as we know, like in the past year, like the COVID-19 pandemic shut down almost everything, and the film industry got hit a lot, particularly for independent filmmaking. So for nearly 7 to 8 months, I was jobless, truly felt hopeless. And so basically kind of like during those period of time, I experienced a lot of kind of depression and loneliness, feeling empty, and have no idea what should I do. And I got a lot of like mixing messages, no matter from my parents or from my friends, they really worry about me as an Asian person, because at the time we had a president kept calling COVID-19 as a Chinese virus or China virus. So they kind of like worry about my safety. So there's a lot of dilemma, and kind of like I'm not quite certain about my decision whether staying in the US is still a good option for me. So this film is more like trying to help me to document a kind of like a unusual times that I was experiencing, and also trying to give me a chance to think about those questions, whether should I still keep pursuing my filmmaking career or going back to China. There's kind of like to answer my questions, my life questions.
Yeah, I think what's really great about your film too is it is a snapshot of what I think many of us have gone through in the last year. And it is, obviously everyone has a different experience, but it really resonates with the idea of questioning our decisions and like, is this the right thing to do? Like, how long is this going to last? Or do we have a future in this profession or with this choice or even living in this city? So I think we're really grateful that you made this story, kind of tying in with T's story, how it was kind of based on a personal story. Yours is obviously very personal. Was there any struggle in what you would show and what you wouldn't?
Well, since the film is in some conversation is in Chinese, so I would say the struggle myself. So sometimes I feel hard for myself to talk about my sexuality in my own language, because that is kind of like a culture I came from, which is very conservative. People rarely talk about homosexuality, and also presented in the film, like because the political environment or the cultural environment in current China right now, so the homosexuality is still not really welcomed. So I think probably sometimes it's gonna be hard for me to use my own language to talk about this issue. And also part of it is also maybe some cultural issue, like I sometimes I can feel very free to talk about my sexuality to some American friends in English, but sometimes it's gonna be hard to talk about those stuff to your parents or your friends in China, because you don't know how they're gonna take from it.
Yeah, definitely. I was wondering if you could give us an update on where you are now, how you're doing. Are you still in the Bay Area? I know the answer to that, but do the viewers know?
Yeah, I'm currently still in the San Francisco Bay Area, and I'm also interested in making some other films to discuss about the Asian community and LGBT communities. So that's something I'm doing right now. And for any audience who would love to view more about my work and what's my next plan, you can follow me on Instagram. It is Will Zang. So that'll be great. You get the first notification about my next project.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much. We really appreciate you being here today. And thanks again for sharing a very personal story with all of us.
My pleasure.
All right. Our next filmmaker is the co-director of Love X Bites. Let's welcome Miat. No. Hello, Miat.
Hi there.
Thank you so much for being here. Let's jump right in. Your film is so fascinating. Where did the story come from?
Oh, well, I don't know. This is the honest answer. I shot it, during the pandemic. Pandemic was raging in Burma. So, and the government's policy was actually to put everyone who has come from abroad into quarantine for 3 weeks. And so, of course, so basically, I got the inspiration from that situation, in which, I think, okay, what gonna happen if two strangers were put into quarantine in the same room for 3 weeks? So this is like the beginning of the spark of the inspiration to this story, and then uh, and then of course I use the imagination for the rest. So that's what happens.
Well, it was a good imagination starting point, so we really appreciate it. As you mentioned, you did film during the pandemic. Can you tell us what that experience was like filming?
Well, it was challenging to say the least, because we have this strict rules and regulation about uh, gathering no more than 5 people. So basically, I am not allowed to have 5 people in this one room. So I have these two actors, and then my co-director, who also serves as the cinematographer, and then me, and then also a sound guy, basically. So we have like these 5 people, and everybody chipped in. So even the two actresses, they were like lifting the stuff and like arranging the lights for us. So even though we basically credited ourselves as directors, we are basically also sound recorders and dresser and crew and lunch caterer. So yeah, it was tough, but we pulled through it. So yeah.
It sounds like it was definitely a labor of love with everybody participating and helping out. With the actors or actresses, can you tell us how you met them and how it was working with them?
Actually, these two actresses, we are actually friends in real life. Well, we have been friends for a couple of years, and then we've worked together for some times. So we really know each other very well. So we are totally comfortable with discussing what exactly we want and what exactly we expect from them performance wise, and they totally are cool with this. So yeah. So basically, like you mentioned, it's not just a labor of love. It's also a buddy project as well. So we basically treated this film like get together of 5 friends, and then doing a little fun project in a room, basically. So yep.
And then we don't see a lot of films from Burma, especially queer films. I was just curious if you could talk about the scene there and any steps that you need to take to create a story there.
Well, we have very strict censorship, which basically not allowed any depiction of homosexuality in a positive manner at all. But luckily for me, this is just a short film that doesn't go, to the theaters in Burma. So I'm able to do whatever I want, without having to deal with the censorship or having to worry about it. So we had 100% creative control. So that's good thing about it. But if I were to do it, so-called legally, for the theatrical releases in Burma, this film would have been banned, really.
Well, I am grateful that you were able to make the film. We really appreciate it. And thank you so much for being here and for creating Love X Bites.
Thank
All
you.
right. Now, yes, thank you. Now we are going to speak with Club Quarantine Director Aurora Brockman. Hello, Aurora.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. It's so great to be here.
Thank you for being here. Can you tell us how you heard about this really fascinating movement?
Yeah, okay. So I heard about it in kind of an embarrassing way. There's this queer podcast called Nancy. It's like a WNYC podcast. And it was the beginning, the first couple weeks of lockdown in the Bay Area. And I was attending a lot of like Zoom dance parties with my friends. I'm an MFA student in documentary film at Stanford right now. And we were all forced into our student housing and doing school on Zoom. And yeah, so I was doing a lot of dance parties with my friends, and then I came across it in this podcast, and I didn't realize that this was like a movement beyond just what my group of friends were doing together. And I joined it, and it was just like absolutely incredible. It was mesmerizing, and yeah, I felt compelled that there was a film in that story. So
that's so cool to have such a personal connection, and I guess in a way, we were discovering it at the same time that you were. Yeah, that's really, really cool. How did you select your subjects, and have they seen the piece?
Oh, yeah. So it's interesting. There's some people in the film who I would go to Club Quarantine every single night. I went basically 6 hours a night for 2 months, every single day of the week. So I was there a lot, too much. It really consumed my life. And I would just sort of like click through the, like 30, 40 pages of Zoom little bubbles, because like 1,000 people would come every night, and see who looked interesting and private message them in the Zoom chat and be like, hey, I'm making a documentary. Do you want to be in my film? And just sort of cast the film through Zoom, basically. And then most people wouldn't ever even notice, but occasionally they would. And then we would exchange Instagrams and we chat after. So there's some people in the film like that I like actually developed real friendships with. And like the doctor and the person who's in like the purple outfit, there's a number of them. Then there's some people who they're just party attendants, and I actually never even knew who they were. And they've actually reached out to me since the film has come out, and they've been like, oh my God, that's me. Or there's like these two older white people in the film. And someone messaged me on Instagram and said, those are my parents. So it's been a really amazing, I've met so many cool people through it. And yes, all the people who I was in contact with have seen the film. And I presume most of the people who are in it have seen it. Who I wasn't in contact with, but I'm actually not really sure if they've all seen it. Yeah.
That's great. I was wondering, I wonder if some of the people who saw themselves in it but weren't like mainly in it, if they're hoping that you'll make a sequel or something.
Yeah, there may be a sequel coming. I can't talk about
Part two.
Yeah. Yeah, yes, but it's all been positive. Lots of people have reached out, like thrilled. It hasn't been anything bad. It's all been very positive.
That's great. What do you hope people take from this film?
Yeah, I feel like, like club spaces have been safe spaces for queer people for a really long time. And I think that it's amazing that during the pandemic, queer people were able to recreate that kind of environment, but in a virtual space, and use it like as a place, a source of community that it has been in like the physical world. And so I feel like it's sort of like an homage to this like long history of clubs as safe spaces and places of community for queer people, but also like a really universal portrait of sort of the experience of being both very isolated but also very together in this experience of the pandemic. Like we're all alone, but we're simultaneously all experiencing it as a community. So yeah, I want people to see the various ways that queer people specifically have been able to like find joy even in this time.
Yeah, that's really interesting concept because like you said, obviously queer people need to find community and it is such a necessity. So I can see how even if we're all thrown into a pandemic, individuals who are used to having to find a community for that connection can adapt, I imagine, quicker or out of necessity. So I can see like why something like this might even be more easy to reach for a queer individual.
Right. Definitely, yeah. And it's amazing because a lot of the people who come to Club Quarantine are there and they've never been in a queer space because they live in countries where that just doesn't exist, or it's not safe, or they might have some physical disability that doesn't allow them to go to those sorts of environments. So it's also allowed even more people to have access to communities like this that have never had them in like in-person physical clubs. So I think it's like an amazing place.
Well, speaking of connections, how can people connect and learn more about your film after this festival?
Yeah, you could follow me on Instagram at Aurora Bobora, or the film is also a New York Times op doc, so you could find it through the New York Times op doc website.
Very cool. Well, thanks again for the chat, Aurora. Really appreciate you creating Club Quarantine and letting us learn more about it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
All right. Finally, we are going to speak with Edward Gunawan, director of Driving with the Top Down. Welcome, Edward.
Hi, Brian. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for coming to the Q&A. It's great to have you here. Your film is touching and at times haunting. Can you talk about how you see yourself as a storyteller?
Oh, interesting question. Yeah, so I used to do a lot more kind of live action fiction. And this is actually the first time I'm doing like a nonfiction piece. I wouldn't call it a documentary per se, but I actually term it a video essay. And I try to blend in archival footage and photos, family photos, but told over in this kind of memoiristic voiceover narration. So it was like an attempt and experimentation. But yeah, I have always wanted to, well, at least my work frequently interrogates this notion of invisibility, displacement, and belonging, especially for marginalized people, marginalized minorities with intersectional identities, much like myself. And this is my attempt in doing that. Yeah, in placing myself, actually making myself visible through it.
And speaking of placing yourself in, I noticed the really interesting archival footage of what looks like a road trip. Is that your own home movies?
No, actually, I actually found that through archive.org. And I just combed through a lot of people's home movies that they uploaded there. Yeah, and then I knew that I wanted to find something from that era, and I love that. It's really, yeah, that kind of grainy quality. I think takes me and I hope viewers too into like that space, you know, of like, you know, where it's literally going on like memory lane.
Yeah,
at least that's what I'm trying to do.
I almost feel like there's a whole movie in that idea of going through archival footage and what you would find, you know, all the different stories that are hidden there.
There's a lot there, and yeah, it's a challenge sometimes because like you can just spend like hours. Like Aurora spent like hours in that club quarantine space. I feel like I did a similar thing in like going through archives.
There will be a Club Quarantine Club Archive crossover movie coming up. So. Your narration is very poetic. did you start with the words or did those evolve afterwards?
Thank you. I found myself thinking more in fragments during the pandemic. I think it's just because, yeah, I think like there's just no way to tell this story in a sense of the period that we live in. Like there's no grand narrative, no master arc, you know. And so I turned towards poetry a lot more during this time. And I read a lot, and I actually started writing poetry again. And so I think it influences the way how I tell this story. I've been asked this question before, and I think for me, the images and the words actually come together almost at the same time. I think conceptually, I knew that this was going to be a video essay because I wanted to speak to that notion of visibility and invisibility. And so, yeah, I mean, I think after watching the short, I think people will get the idea that I grew up with very negative portrayals of my community as a Chinese Indonesian and also queer people. This was like in the 80s and 90s. So like, it's like during the AIDS pandemic. And so, yeah, a lot of the things that I grew up with is just very narrow and just negative stereotypes. And so I felt like, yeah, it's a responsibility for me to actually put out images that are more positive, at least for my community. And so I think when those two things come together, yeah, it worked out the way it did.
Yeah, I feel like one of the best ways to change people's views or minds, or even just help people see themselves better, like you said, is to create these stories and share them. And the more people that will see them, the better. So thank you again. Where can people learn more about your film?
Excuse me. I have a website, my personal website. It's called edward.com. Excuse me.
It's all good. This is an emotional Q&A, so.
And then, yeah, I have an Instagram, but I'm not very active actually. So the best way is like through my website.
Okay. Thank you. Well, thanks again, Edward. Let's welcome everyone back. So we will bring everyone back. Once again, thank you all so much for being here. We really appreciate all of the stories that you told. I have one club to join, one archive to go through, a couple of dates to go on. I'm excited. Life is exciting. Thank you all again. Thanks so much for coming, and enjoy the rest of your CAAMFest 2021.
Thank you.